Hi, I'm Steve Pleich, and I'll be your host for this evening's program on Voices from the Village. Tonight we're going to be talking about extremely important and very topical issue in town. That's the BearCat and militarization of law enforcement. You may have seen on the front page of the Sentinel, in fact, today, an article featuring this issue and giving you some background about what has happened since the City Council has determined that they will accept a Homeland Security grant to fund armored vehicle known as a BearCat. We're going to be talking much about that and the history of that, and get into really the militarization of police departments both locally and across the country. I'm really pleased to have with me 4 people who have been working on this issue continuously and in a very determined fashion to try to bring as much information to the people of Santa Cruz as possible. I welcome John Malkin, award-winning journalist, I hasten to say. Sherry Conable, certainly a CodePink coordinator. Ron Pomerantz, ACLU member and retired firefighter. And of course, Abbi Samuels, one of the founding members of SCRAM and of course associated locally here with Food Not Bombs. Welcome to all of you. I'd like us to take a look quickly at a short video that'll show you kind of what a Lenco BearCat looks like. So we have a basis kind of our discussion and kind of a touchstone to see what kind of vehicle may be coming to our community in the fullness of time. So if we could play that video, that would be terrific.
This is the new Lenco armored rescue vehicle for the South Bay Police Agencies.
I'm Dave Christian from the Redondo Beach Police Department. We just obtained this new vehicle from Lenco. It's called a BearCat. We were able to purchase it with Homeland Security grant money, and the purpose of it was to share with all the other South Bay agencies for rescues, officer rescues, citizen rescues, and high-risk situations where it would be impractical not to use something with armor. It starts out as a Ford F550 four-wheel drive truck that they remove the bed and cut the cab off of and install their own body. The vehicle weighs approximately 17,000 pounds. It'll hold comfortably 8 officers. We can put in maybe 10 or 12. It gets kind of tight with complete gear on, but we can hold up to about 12 officers.
Okay, and of course that's a short video of the Redondo Beach BearCat they have down there. Our Chief Vogel, has told folks who have asked that the BearCat that we are ordering or may come to the city will not have an open turret as the picture there, but nevertheless I think gives you an idea of what kind of vehicle may be coming to our city for whatever purpose the police department deems necessary, and that's what the discussion is all about amongst not only council and the police department but also in the community. John, start us off. You've done much of the background work about finding out about the grant and about the BearCat and really a lot of the procedural history of that. Give us a kind of a background and idea about how you got into it and what you learned as you went along.
I think there's 2 parts to it. One is the vehicle itself, which encompasses also militarization of police that's happening across the country. Actually, I would point out that that part, it's true that militarization is happening, but actually police have always been militarized. And I'm learning a lot from this this author and Professor Peter Kraska, who talks about this, and he says it should be obvious that the police, since their inception, have been to some extent militarized. After all, the foundation of military and police power is the same: the state-sanctioned capacity to use physical force to accomplish their respective objectives, which are external and internal security. So there's just a matter of how much militarization is happening. What we're trying to address and what I've been researching is how much it's happening here, and discovered this grant that came from Department of Homeland Security to Santa Cruz Police Department. They applied for this grant in 2013, and then this process happened around the grant, which is the other part, the process. So I've been interested to see how democratic or how not democratic that's been. In May of 2014, Department of Homeland Security told Santa Cruz Police that they had been approved for this grant for $251,000. It's 2 grants that came from DHS. And it wasn't until December 9th that the City Council, and therefore the public, heard about it for the first time. I'm sorry, December 2nd. Then December 9th, the City Council voted on it. So they only had a week of knowledge of that. And in fact, it was put on a consent agenda, and it was described as an emergency rescue and response vehicle. That was the only description. There was no photo. At the December 9th meeting, the police gave a presentation about why they wanted this vehicle. And it included, for safety for police officers and first responders coming to events. Something that Peter Kraska and others have pointed out, often these vehicles, they're armored personnel carriers. That's what the BearCat is. Often, no matter how they're described, how they're going to be used, they end up being used almost all the time for drug-related search warrant raids, and that is the case in the United States. At the meeting, the City Council meeting of December 9th, the police told the City Council that there was a deadline for approving the grant, and because of that, a decision had to be made that day. In fact, one of the representatives said the deadline was the end of the year. The deadline has not been discovered yet, and now we're 2 months later. Obviously, I think the City Council did feel pressure to make that decision that night, and they did. They voted 6-1 to approve the grant. Other things that were not mentioned in the grant, I should say in the material that became public and at the meeting where they approved it, was that the BearCat really is a SWAT vehicle. And in the project proposal written by Santa Cruz Police, they say that directly, that they have a SWAT team and they need a vehicle for their SWAT team. SWAT was not mentioned. It was also not mentioned that there's a very large anti-terrorism component to all of this. It's the war on terror. And in fact, talking about militarism, that's part of the militarization of the police, or the continuum of militarization, that police are inside of a war. And for a while it has been the war on drugs, and it has become the war on terrorism. The proposal and the documents around the BearCat grant are very clear about this. They describe a vehicle that's called a CBRNE vehicle. That's a chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, explosive vehicle. That was also not mentioned to the City Council and the public. And very significantly, police didn't mention that there are already armored vehicles in the area. Scotts Valley Police Department has a armored truck they bought from Brinks, a used truck. They bought it for $10, and it actually showed up to a shooting that happened 2 years ago where 2 officers were killed, and the man who killed them was also killed. None of these things were mentioned, and they're coming out now. And just to end with this short synopsis, we're now in February 2015, and in the Sentinel that just came out today,
Article today, yeah.
the police chief is quoted a couple of times saying he wished that the process had been more inclusive and more information had been made available. I think we all wish that.
And of course, I think everybody bemoans the fact that the process wasn't all that it could be. Talking about a consent agenda item on December 9 that was pulled. There was considerable concern by the community, Abbi and others, really exhorting the council to take some action about this, to really let the public debate happen. Subsequent council meetings have been very well attended by people from SCRAM and like that. And Sherry, that leads me into what I want to ask you. You've mentioned to me that this issue, the BearCat, the militarization of local police departments, has resonated with the community in a way that few others have in the past. Give us your ideas about why that may be and how that's really come to happen.
Well, Steve, I just want to take a moment to thank John for all the research, because
Absolutely,
that's been
yeah.
a driving force in our ability to actually work with the public sentiment that has been so obvious. And I've been a grassroots organizer for a long time, and I think what happens is you identify something that feels very important to you, and you start to move forward slightly, and you don't know. You don't know if this reflects the community, and what we found out very quickly is that the community was very concerned about this decision. There was a lot of feeling, there was a lot of willingness to show up and participate, and this is one of the largest responses I've seen in a very quick amount of time in the 30 years that I've been a grassroots organizer in Santa Cruz. So it's hit a nerve. It is a national campaign. CodePink founder Medea Benjamin was in town just before this happened. So CodePink, Veterans for Peace, United for Peace and Justice, and Partners for Civil Justice at least, all of those organizations have identified this as a priority issue nationally, to look at the progressive militarization of the police. And here in Santa Cruz, fortunately a few people found out about it. We went to the December 9th meeting. We were kind of shocked at the process, shocked at how little information the council had to make that decision. We then met with the mayor, who reached out to us because of our concerns, and very quickly, as we started to put the word out in the community, more and more people started to gather. The first time we went back to council, there were 300 people. The next time, there are 100 people. There's a petition that now has 1,000 signatures on it. It was just clear that a chord had really been struck in the community. And so one thing I want to emphasize is where we want to take that energy is we have a new council. The council that made the decision on December 9th turned over, and 2 new members were seated.
Yeah, 2 of the council
Rochelle
members were
Naroyan
seated,
and
yeah.
Cynthia Chase. So in essence, we have a new council. We have an admission even from the police chief today in the paper, and I thank him for this, that the process was less forthcoming than it should have been. It certainly wasn't a democratic process. Obviously, this matters in a huge way to the community. There was not nearly enough information to make a decision. We have new information. And so it is perfectly legitimate to ask the new council to bring this back on the agenda for reconsideration and for new action. And I think that's their job, because what their job is to facilitate democracy in the city of Santa Cruz. It's clear that hundreds of residents care about this and want this re-agendized and feel that the process did not represent good public process. Besides that, in the contract for the BearCat itself, and the check has now been cut for that, it says without penalties it may be returned. It can be returned. So it can be returned. We had a horrible public process. We need to heal that wound. This council is empowered to do that, so we're asking them, bring it back on the agenda. Let's take another vote. Let's have a full public hearing. I fully believe that if they do that, there will be at least 500 people who show up, and it needs to be scheduled at the Civic, not at City Hall. This is huge. And then beyond that, to establish policies so that something like this can't happen in the future, where something of this weight to the community is just sort of, they try to slide it in as a consent item, and to look in the larger picture in Santa Cruz County of the militarization of the police, and to put policies and ordinances in place that would stop the flow of military equipment into our law enforcement agencies.
And I think those are all good points. Certainly, regardless of where you fall on the issue of the BearCat, I think the whole community would like to see a more thoroughgoing and transparent process. I don't think there's any argument about that. Ron, let's go back now for a moment. We saw the video of the Lenco BearCat that Redondo Beach has. You, retired firefighter, a member of the ACLU, have been involved in many first responder situations in your professional life. What's your view of the need for this type of vehicle, a first responder vehicle of any kind? I know you were going to speak to council about this. Give us your views on that.
Safety of emergency responders is critical. You're a firefighter the rest of your life. I am. I am retired, but I still have that kind of mentality. There's an inherent risk of what all emergency responders, first responders do, no matter what precautions are available. So I am disappointed the police are selling this strictly as a rescue vehicle, because clearly it might be used, it would probably be used for that in a very small way. But for police functions, it's used, we know, for drug busts, we know for serving subpoenas, and things of that nature. And once, big boys and their toys, I'm one of those big boys. I love my new pieces of equipment that are faster, quieter, bigger, more powerful, squirt water further, our rescue tools, cutting people out of vehicles. So it's not that I'm inherently against some sort of progress, but I see this as more a detriment in terms of making our work. I think more as a firefighter than a police officer, but as a firefighter, it inherently would make our work, I think, even more difficult. We work very, very hard in our community relations. We go to schools, we go to community events, we have the kids come to the fire station. We work really, really hard to engage, to have a good rapport, to build a trust.
Exactly.
A community trust. Yeah. And I really see this kind of vehicle as contrary to building a trust. It really, I can see it from a police point of view too. And it's not out of their budget. It's Homeland Security. It evokes power and an overwhelming force, which is, like in occasions, probably might need it. And it does provide some security and safety for the passengers within it. But the downside, I'll give you a story. I was a new firefighter, and the police came to our station and they took our turnouts. Turnouts are our safety equipment we go into fires and burning buildings with. And the idea was they were going to do a drug bust. And so they were going to use the good rapport and the trust of the fire to sort of get in real quick and to do whatever operation they had planned. And it had to be approved internally within the fire department, obviously the police. And I can't tell you what a drawback, how harmful that kind of operation was. And on one hand, it probably made the police safer. They got in, they had, these aren't police, they're just firefighters. So they could get in, and so it was safer for them. But the other side, it made it much less safe for fire. There was a question, should we wear bulletproof vests? There were some shootings in the LA area around that time. And we chose not to, even though in some way it would kind of make us safer. But on the other hand, it changes the culture and the mentality of what your job is. So I see this as really a downside. So you're taking training time for a military vehicle.
Yeah, of course.
So there's other, it doesn't come out of nowhere. So what other training time is necessary? And so to me, I think of domestic violence cases or sexual assault cases or the mentally ill in our community. It's going to detract from that kind of training for the police.
Yeah, good point, yeah.
And so it's the downside to community policing. I believe Chief Vogel is a proponent of community policing, in which the police are part of the community and they engage, and there's a trust factor. And this kind of vehicle, to me, is a distraction at best and a deterrent at worst for that kind of operation.
And I think that there is a sense in the community that is true. Before I go to Abby, let me remind you that this is a call-in show. 425-8848, extension 30, 425-8848. You can ask any of our panelists, guests, a question. Abbi Samuels, of course, Abbi a terrific article, really, in the Sentinel today. Jim Brown, I think you really articulated the positions of SCRAM, which I'm sure that you'll enlighten us on here. With your partner, Keith McHenry, founder of Food Not Bombs, you guys are not only feeding people on the weekends over at the post office, you are giving them political voice as well. You know, because Food Not Bombs is involved in many, many areas of activism in Santa Cruz. But you are one of the founding members of SCRAM, Santa Cruz Resistance Against Militarism! Exclamation point. So tell us about that group, how it got started, what you know, what the internal workings that are in terms of, you know, trying to push back the BearCat.
Sure. Well, what's interesting is it's been the easiest activist thing I've done. And it was really amazing. I didn't have to do much at the beginning, except come up. A couple friends, mainly one, came up with a list of questions for the city council on December 9th. I didn't find out about it till about 1 in the morning on December 9th, morning of December 9th, and quickly got the word out all over Facebook. And actually on Facebook is how I found out about it. That it was an agenda item. Someone posted it. I believe it was Brent Adams. Thank you, Brent. And so what happened was a number of people gave me questions, one particular person, and the city council did not answer one of those questions when I started presenting them. And I noticed that, not to get into all the details, but all of a sudden, so many people came to the first, you know, our first meeting at the city council meeting to discuss this. It was mind-blowing, and it keeps on happening every single city council meeting without doing a huge amount of work. So that's been a really good thing. What happened, how it organically evolved was Don Lane asked to if I wanted to meet with him, Mayor Don Lane, and so then I decided, well, I'll get a group of people together to meet. He said I can get a group of people, so I requested Sherry, who knew a lot more people than I did, and she helped me get people that represented different factions here in Santa Cruz, including a retired firefighter, Ron, a couple people from WILF, and ACLU, some veterans we have, veterans and Food Not Bombs, and I can't remember all the different organizations, but a number of them. And so we all met and had, figured out our tactics. What do we want? And I think we thought, what is our vision of this group? And we didn't have a name, of course. And we thought, do we want to talk about amendments? Because one of the things that was kind of disturbing when on December 9th, when Micah Posner, who suggested to have an amendment to not use it for peaceful protest, and the police said no, they don't want to have that as an amendment. So that tells you a lot. They just want it open-ended, and maybe because there's different meanings of what peace is. Maybe it's not considered peaceful when you block a street. Anyway, so that's where a big concern started happening as far as the amendment. So we decided, do we want to look at what do we do? What does a BearCat have? How its usage, how it will be used within the community? And we said no. We don't even want to go there. That's not our interest. We do not want this BearCat in the city of Santa Cruz, and that is our main, and we've stuck, that's what we just stayed with. Every single person that has gotten up to the city council to speak, except for I think one person was for it. Every single person that spoke never mentioned about amendments. They all mentioned they do not want this BearCat in our city. The SCRAM consists of about 15 members right now. So our concern is the perception we want the police, I'm not anti-police, we want the police to protect and serve.
Right.
This is putting us as combatants, as enemies. We don't want that perception, and like Ron said and many others, the mindset when you get in that vehicle. And we could tell you stories upon stories, even in Santa Cruz, where a SWAT team has gone to the wrong place, gone to the wrong house, and it's been a disastrous. So because of the misuse of this vehicle, it could cause a lot more damage than good. And if it's for a safety vehicle, why does it have gun ports? In the video, it didn't show 11 gun ports. Isn't it 11? So, you know, that's interesting. It may not have the turret on top, but it has, why do they need the gun ports if it's for a rescue vehicle? And what's also very interesting is they knew the exact price, yet they said they weren't sure which one they were going to get, but they knew the exact cost. So that was, there just seems to be not complete transparency there. And we spoke about the timing. And so those are our, that's what I could say mostly about SCRAM.
And in addition to pushing back the BearCat, SCRAM certainly, as I understand it, has a community educational function as well. There's going to be a forum at Loudon Nelson this Wednesday evening at 7 o'clock, sponsored by all the organizations within SCRAM, and ACLU included, I'm proud to say. And so people have an opportunity to come out and talk about it and really educate themselves about not only the process but the substance of this issue. John, you, as much as anybody, have, in your digging around trying to find out information about this, had much communication with the Santa Cruz Police Department as anybody. You know, and you've either gotten some forthcoming responses or not. But you know, where are they now on this, you think? Yeah.
Well, the latest that I know.
Oh, hold on, John, just for a moment. Lisa, we have a call here.
Good.
Hold that thought.
It might be the police chief calling.
What do you say? 15 members steering committee? Talk about
Oh, I did
hundreds of
mention,
people that
okay, yeah.
represent.
We're mentioning the phone again, 425-8848, 425-8848. You can call and ask a question. That's extension 30. So, John, go ahead, please.
The latest I know is what was printed in the Sentinel. I have to say, I find it a little difficult actually to get the kind of interviews I'd like to get from representatives at the police department. For the most part, I have gotten, I think it's true, I've gotten 0 voice interviews, either via phone or in person. No one has agreed to do that. And mostly I'm having contact with Lieutenant Escalante, who's the new media person for the police department. So periodically I'm trying to get details about the BearCat, about, it was quite a revelation, I think, when I discovered and others started discovering and thinking of this idea. I wonder if there's other armored vehicles around. So I contacted the Scotts Valley police chief, and I spoke to him on the telephone and did an interview with him. That was very interesting. One thing that came up in that interview was that, kind of as Ron was describing, the police chief there said, fire department quite often has raised money for schools by auctioning off tickets for kids to come and play on the big rigs or get driven around or something. He said, we're doing the same thing with our SWAT vehicle. We make a lot of money for local schools by selling tickets for kids to ride on the truck, get driven to birthday parties. I think it says something about the need of schools, that they need money. But I think Peter Kraska would put that in the cultural, he breaks down militarization of police into 4 components: material, cultural, organizational, and operational. Police arriving in tank-like vehicles in body armor and looking with these helmets and semi-automatic rifles, bashing in doors, has become entertainment and normalized Part of that normalization and cultural militarization is making it fun for kids. He added, the Scotts Valley police chief added, and we give the kids stickers too. These things seem vastly on different levels, giving stickers and riding around in a armored personnel carrier and making it a fun thing. So I think, I want to mention this, that I think what SCRAM is doing in Gandhian nonviolent direct action terms, it's obstructing something that people in the community don't want to have. Gandhi talked about obstructive and constructive. There's this whole other part where it would be really valuable for other people, and SCRAM too, if people are interested, to construct ways to develop safety in our community without bringing in more and more weapons, tools, training that has police acting more and more like military and using a force or threatening force. So I envision that happening, developing trust, building relationships, building communication. So that's what I have to say.
Well, what troubles me, I think, is that you start to develop a culture where there are warrior cops. They're not public servants anymore. They're not, protect and serve. I know that we as a society don't have, the cop on the beat and Officer Krupke. That's just not the nature of our society anymore. But do we really want to have a fully militarized police department where the warrior can? I know it's not sexy sometimes to just do your job as a police officer, but I really rue the day that we have the warrior cop culture becomes part of our community, because I don't think that reflects Santa Cruz community values, frankly. Sherry, let me ask you this. I know SCRAM has been reaching out to council members individually, and there have been some meetings taking place. What's your sense of SCRAM's discussions with council, and I know that's something you're pushing forward. What is that having in terms of effect at this point, you think?
Well, I think it's really important for us to go to council members and talk with them really openly and see what they have to say, see what their concerns are. And also what we've been doing is giving them a binder, of which you have one in front of you, full of all sorts of really good research and information so that they can educate themselves.
And you can hold it up since the camera's on you.
There's all sorts of good video links.
And we'll have, that's Abbi Samuels,
so
spent many hours doing these.
Thick, full of all sorts of information that they didn't get on December 9th when they made this decision.
Exactly, thank you.
So they're each getting one of these, and all of the council members except one have agreed to meet with us. And I think we're getting mixed reactions of where they are. They're certainly asking questions. They're open to hearing from us. I don't think we're not getting a lot of commitments one way or the other about how they stand, but I think what we want to do now is get the commitment to bring it back on the agenda, for sure.
And Ron, your wife, Jane Weed Pomerantz, was she mayor as well as vice mayor and served on the council? You yourself ran for city council in 2010. Enjoyed running that campaign with you. What's your sense of council right now? I mean, you know some of these folks and have been able to talk to them and certainly participating in some of the meetings.
Well, I can only speculate on some council members. I've only personally met with 3 so far, and that would be Micah Posner, Don Lane, and Cynthia Chase. And I was impressed. All 3 of them are open and receptive to, in some fashion, of reconsidering this decision, because it was hastily done. There was a lot of questions asked, very few were answered. Just for example, some really basic ones. So what's the lifespan of this kind of vehicle? How much does it cost to maintain it? What are the training costs? Right. Just pretty simple. How's it outfitted? Right. What does the thing look like? So, those are just some simple ones that weren't even addressed. It's been ordered, and we still don't even know this kind of stuff. So those are the kind of questions that these 3 council members are going, yeah, I think those are reasonable questions to ask, and they should be answered. They should have been answered before,
Of course.
before the purchase went through. And just to add to Sherry, Berkeley has turned this back. They ordered a vehicle,
You're
they
here.
turned it back. So it's not like Santa Cruz is be cutting edge on anything. It's been done, and in my opinion, for a whole host of reasons that we're all talking about, that's the direction.
So Steve, can I just leap in for a minute since Ron just mentioned Berkeley? We talked about, we're having a public forum Wednesday evening from 7 to 9 at Loudon Nelson Community Center. And we have 2 out-of-town guests as well as 2, that way?
Yeah,
Is that
there
better?
you go. You can see it.
Sorry.
Except can't see you. There we go.
So as well as John and Abby, who are here tonight, are going to be on the panel, we have an activist from Berkeley who was part of the pushback in Berkeley, and that successful pushback, and that BearCat was not delivered, or if it was delivered, it was returned. And we also have an activist from San Leandro they've just been through a very similar set of circumstances. The initial vote was positive to accept the BearCat. They're doing awesome work on this, so it's going to be a really good evening of information, and then we'll have a Q&A that people can participate in after the panelists speak. We also have a good video of the professor that John has been referring to.
Okay,
He's
yeah.
put out some awesome information about this, so I encourage people to come out for that.
Great, fantastic. I know, Abby, you're a veteran of Occupy Santa Cruz, certainly at the table here as much of a street activist, really, as any of us. And you want to keep the pressure up on this. You know, what are the next steps to keep the pressure up to say, you know, we want to push back the BearCat?
Well, first of all, before I go on, I want to remember that when I said there are 15 SCRAM members, what I meant to say, 15 core planning, they're on the planning committee. They represent hundreds of people out there, and you know, so I just want to make that clear. It's not just 15 people are fighting this, it's hundreds. The other thing, and to answer your question, what are next steps? Basically the forum is the biggest thing that we have going, which is this Wednesday. And then Tuesday, we want people to please come out and still support. We have a rally at 4:30 to show our enthusiasm against having the BearCat here. And that's this Tuesday at 4:30. We only ask for people to come for an hour and a half. And our next, continuing to talk to the city council members to get it put back on the agenda. Those are things I'm requesting or asking as favors to the city council members to watch a video that we're talking about by Peter Kraskow doing a Senate hearing. And I sent out an email actually to Don Lane and Micah, and within 1 hour Don Lane watched it. So I want to thank him. I really thought that was
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
thought that was very impressive that he watched it. I'm waiting to hear back more feedback though. So.
And that's one of the things that SCRAM has talked about, is to perhaps get council to re-agendize, reconsider this acceptance of the grant. We do have a video that I think I would like to play now that shows a council meeting in Keene City, New Hampshire, when they had one of the council members stood up and wanted to reconsider their BearCat purchase. So if we can play that, that would be, I think, elucidating for people to kind of get a sense of what SCRAM would like our city council to do.
Regarding a communication from Councilor Clark requesting a reconsideration of the acceptance of a Homeland Security grant for the BearCat armored vehicle. On a vote of 5-0, the Finance Organization and Personnel Committee recommends accepting the communication from Councilor Clark as informational. Signed, Mitchell H. Greenwald.
As we consider this next item, obviously there's a lot of interest in this next item. I would ask that all councilors remember that we're elected to act in the best interests of the citizens of Keene. Our jurisdiction is local. I would ask that you please restrict your remarks to the local issues that are germane and relevant to this discussion, and anything else will be ruled out of order.
Last December, Keene was offered a Homeland Security grant to fund the purchase of a BearCat vehicle. The vote at the time was 13-1 in favor. In January, a letter was received from Councilor Clark requesting a review and potentially a reconsideration of the issue by the new council, which is allowed by our rules of order. The Finance Organization Personnel Committee held a public meeting in which there was verbal input, written input, and all of this has been recorded into the record. The committee considered the information. Again, it has been recorded. And the decision made by the committee at the time was to accept it as informational, but it did not recommend any further action.
I move to amend the committee report so as to rescind the prior action taken by the City Council on December 15, 2011, and to reject the Homeland Security grant for the Lenco BearCat vehicle. I wanted to bring up a statement that the Lenco representative had made to the national press about this issue. And what he said was that this grant was the opportunity for Lenco to tap into a $34 billion domestic violence market, which in my mind really meant only one thing, that it was a poster child for all of that waste and fraud that we're talking about, and all the politicians in the world are running around saying that they're going to do something about. You know, I know some of you here are going to vote for this because, you know, you're afraid about explaining your vote to some grieving widow. There aren't going to be any grieving widows because this vehicle isn't going to save the life of one police officer. It's not about public safety. It's not about safety. You know, this vehicle is not going to save even one life. It's not about that. It's not about opposing your police department. How do you feel about it? Is this the right thing to do, or is it not the right thing to do?
I've received a lot of phone calls about the BearCat, probably about 80. And of that, 10% are for it. It isn't, I just don't think we have that level of crime. This isn't LA, it's not New York, it's not Miami. We don't have gang wars and riots where we need batons and tear gas.
Fellow councilors, I ask you to think about this. Yes, we are Little Keene, New Hampshire, but we are not exempt from catastrophe.
Well, I just wanted to, I've spoken at a couple of the appearances before the city council. I'm with Veterans for Peace and the Veterans Bill Motto Post downtown.
Great. But
I had two questions that I was really interested to know what your take is on it. I don't know who the best to answer it would be, but one is, it seems to me that there's an awful, big consequences in questioning what the police want to do. I mean, it's almost as if they don't think that anybody should be asking questions of them. I don't know whether that's true or not, but that's one of the senses. And do you think that the police fear this kind of discussion? I mean, maybe they just would rather just nobody talk about it. And the other question is, do you think the city council really wants to make policy decisions that actually might overturn something that the city manager or the police department wants?
all right, well, thank you so much for calling in. We'll put that to our panel. And of course, that is the eternal question, whether or not the police are responsive to any kind of public policy pressure, and whether or not this council, or any council for that matter, is willing to make sound public policy that's reflected in our community values. John, what do you think?
I think at the bottom, police are the people in our community who are sanctioned with the legal use of violence and force, and can even kill people and even drag them away, put them in jail. Mm-hmm. So I think there is a fear. I would hope that we can develop a culture where that's not the dominant way of dealing with conflict that arises in communities. there is a fear. And I think that fear comes out even in democratic processes discussing the police themselves. Yeah, absolutely. Then it becomes more apparent in a discussion like this at city council meetings where the only people who are allowed to give a full presentation on something dealing with the police are the police. Then when the mayor, he did allow for extra time at one city council meeting, January 13th, does that sound right?
Yeah.
So there was more time for the public to give 3, 2, and 1 minute comments. At the end of that, he said, and now the police chief is going to give a presentation. So they tend to have the more dominant voice in discussions. It's not democratic. So I think for those reasons, people find it not very satisfying and are afraid of participating.
And of course, in addition to being involved in any movement to push the BearCat back, there are other ways for people to be involved. There are many levels of process here ongoing that people in the community can involve themselves in, one of which is a citywide grant review policy that has been spoken of. Sherry, tell us a little bit about that.
Well, of course, one of the big objections to what happened in this process was how little notice was given to the public, how little information was shared, and what a huge step it is in Santa Cruz to do this, and yet there was so little public review and public notice and transparency. And so one of the things that we've been asking for is now a citywide grant review policy, so that something like this can't happen in the future. So there would be requirements in that policy of at what point any department, not just to the police, have to come to city council if they want to apply for a grant. And then again, when they apply for the grant, and then again, if they receive the grant, that all of that will be fully in public view, that there will be chance for the public to comment on that. And Micah Posner in particular, City Council member Micah Posner is moving forward on this very quickly, working with other council members. And with the city manager, I think his initial read is there's a lot of support for this. They understand this process was not okay, and that this does need to be cleaned up. And I think it's going to be a successful effort to change that.
Ron, you have something to add in that respect?
Yeah, what I think philosophically, my view of the council is basically there's not a lot of leadership. The city's pretty much run by staff, the city manager and the city attorney. And the council, unfortunately, is over the last 10, 15 years has taken a role of rubber stamping pretty much what's brought to them. And an issue like the BearCat and a department like the police, which is pretty much the tail that wags the dog in the city, it's a real uphill battle, let alone that the decision's already been made and to have the council go back on it. I think for the most part, the council members kind of wish, oh my gosh, I wish it would just go away.
But it's not going to go away.
But it's not going to. And they're realizing that.
Yeah.
So there's a few council members that are stepping up to try to understand the community's concerns and get the background information that should have been presented to them in December. And I think the police just made a tactical error, and they thought that this thing would just kind of slide through. And this one's way too big. Yeah. And so with that in mind, that's the situation we're in. And I wish the council members they're voted to be leaders of the city, and I hope we'll see it,
Abbi?
starting with this case.
I wanted to mention, I don't know if we really spoke about this, but what's happened, it's not just here in Santa Cruz. As you can see on the videos, we've shown one from one city and one from New Hampshire. That this is, there's, I have to say, sneaking it in right before the public has any warning on it. It's in with Homeland Security, a part of UASI, which stands for Urban Area Security Initiative, which is basically stopping from claiming that certain areas are prone to terrorist attacks. And then they're claiming that Santa Cruz is prone to terrorist attacks because of the boardwalk, the university Lockheed Martin, which is quite far away in Bonnie Doon somewhere. And so these are the reasons. They're lumping that as a reason. And I want to say that all over, every single piece of paper we have says nothing, hardly anything about rescue vehicle. It says the CBRNE, it says, you know, so many other pieces, things that have nothing to do with being a rescue vehicle.
Right.
Yet, the way it's presented to the public is it's a rescue vehicle. And only when we started presenting all this documentation did they start mentioning, oh yes, it is going to be used also in case we have a terrorist attack here in Santa Cruz. So it's a fear-based situation that we're working on instead of working together as a community to work together and come up with, like I said, protect and serve instead of where they're enemies and just, I don't want to live in a fear-based.
Well, and we've seen recently that this is a wider conversation that's happening. Patti Smith was here recently singing about the BearCat. Angela Davis at the King Convocation mentioned the BearCat. To me, yes, indeed. It seems like everybody is watching Santa Cruz to see how they respond to what may be a concerted effort by the Department of Defense and Homeland Security to foist military equipment onto local municipalities under the guise of anti-terrorism. How does Santa Cruz respond to this? They're responding in the ways that SCRAM as is asking them to. They're responding in other ways by showing up and at least wanting some information about the process. They're responding in wanting to know more information at a minimum level about what it is that's going to be in our community. So I think that's a concern that I have, and my observation is, you know, how is Santa Cruz going to respond to this pressure? John, we have about 3 or 4 minutes, a final minute or so from you.
I don't know if it was clear from the video of Keene that their grant was also a Department of Homeland Security grant.
They said that, yeah.
Because of terrorism. They identified as a potential terrorist target for their community their annual Pumpkin Festival.
Ah, there you go.
So this has become...
Any terrorist with his salt is going to want to attack any
Exactly.
pumpkin festival, regardless of where it is.
Rainbow family.
Yeah, right. So it's curious what is called a terrorist site or a terrorist organization now in our culture. But that's kind of part of the iceberg that's under the water that is pretty interesting. I don't think that, from my talking with city council people in Santa Cruz, I don't think they understood that from reading this 3-page agenda report, which they then voted to approve this grant. I read it about 10 times before I started saying to myself, what is UWASI? And there is a anti-terrorism approval authority, which is part of UWASI, the Urban Area Security Initiative. They meet monthly in Dublin, California, and they decide which grants to approve and which police departments will get which equipment. Anti-terrorism approval authority. And it states that, this document stated that Santa Cruz has been declared a federal buffer zone also. And I don't think they considered what that means in agreeing to get this grant. So there's a lot of information.
Sherry, and just a few words in closing from you.
I think when activists do this kind of work, there's a perception that we're anti-police. And I just want to say that that's not, I think, what we're about. That I understand, I think most of us understand police are folks. A lot of them do a good job. They've got family waiting at home for them to come home in the evening, and we want them to be safe.
Well said.
But the protective side of this vehicle and how often that might be true compared to the downside of this vehicle, I just think the weight is so on the side of the downside and how it might be misused. This is not about being against police and them being as safe as possible in a job that has some inherent danger in it.
Ron, about 10 seconds for you.
This is a big issue. It's national, and we're a microcosm of what's going on, and the BearCat is huge, and it touches on so many aspects of life in Santa Cruz.
Abby?
And I want to say, please come to support us this Tuesday and every city council until it gets back on the agenda, and please come during that time at 4:30 before public comment at 5 o'clock. And we'll supply signs. You don't have to do anything. And we have food there.
Well, thank you all for your work. I'll remind everybody there is a forum on Wednesday, 7 o'clock at Loudon Nelson. Your work is really not only educating the community, but in my opinion, enriching it. So I thank you for that. John Malkin, always a pleasure to see you. Sherry, thanks for your work. Ron, of course. And Abby, food not bombs, food not bombs. You know, so thank you all for being here. You will be able to see all of these folks at all the subsequent events, because this is really the core team of people who are bringing this issue to the city, and I think it's one that really deserves your attention. So thanks very much for watching this edition of Voice from the Village. For our producer, Charlie Phillips and Betsy Phillips, for the people in the booth and people behind the camera, thanks so much for tuning into this issue of Voices from the Village. I'm Steve Pleich. Good night. See you next time.